I'm Jim Axelrod of CBS News on assignment for 60 Minutes Sports. Last month's avalanche on Mount Everest killed 16 climbing guides, the deadliest accident in the history of the world's highest mountain. Our story is about American mountain climber Alison Levine, who's learned a lot about the dangers of Everest firsthand, having climbed it twice herself. The lessons she brought down from the mountain about fear, risk, and leadership have become highly sought after far from the Himalayas. With a business degree from Duke and a job at Goldman Sachs on her resume, leaders from Fortune 500 companies, the world of professional sports, and the U.S. military want to hear what Alison Levine has figured out about surviving and thriving in extreme environments. It's not just a matter of harnessing her strengths, but perhaps more importantly, learning from her most difficult moments.
I was scared. Up on that mountain, high up on that summit ridge in a storm, I was scared.
By the time Alison Levine approached the summit of Mount Everest in 2002, she had already scaled the highest peaks on 6 of the 7 continents. She was leading the first expedition to the top of Everest, made up entirely of American women. Their climb up the mountain's south face had been a weeks-long 2 steps forward, 1 step back process to adjust their bodies to the thin air above 26,000 feet.
Things progressed quite well, although come summit day, we had bad weather. And a storm blew in very early in the day.
What kind of window did you have? Couldn't you just wait for the weather to pass?
So we didn't really know how long the storm was going to linger. And you're at 26,000 feet. It's also known as the death zone because your body is literally starting to die. And you don't want to spend a lot of time up there.
After 2 months on the mountain, climbing 5 miles into the sky, Alison and her team ended up a football field short of the summit, facing a critical decision: push on and risk death, or turn around and come off the mountain alive.
There are bodies that are frozen there that have been there for years and years, so there's a constant reminder of bad luck and bad decisions. And we ended up having to abandon our summit attempt just a couple hundred feet from the top.
But to be 100 yards from the summit and not to go must have been unbelievably difficult.
At the time, all you're thinking about is, I don't like this weather. I don't want to be up in the death zone in a storm. But after you get to safety, you start thinking, wow, okay, well, I feel stronger now and the weather looks good now. But you can't second guess those kinds of decisions.
Alison was certain this had been her one shot at Everest, but she soon found her focus not on what she lost, but what she found.
I was a different person when I came back from the mountain. I feel like it really did change me, and I started looking at uncontrollable factors in a different way. I looked at managing risk in a different way. I looked at teamwork in a different way. It's called acclimatization.
She began to compile the compelling lessons of her expedition, quickly finding an audience with those who could profit from applying them.
Trust me when I tell you that turning around and walking away from the deal is harder than continuing on. But when you're up there in these mountains, you have to be able to make very tough decisions when the conditions around you are far from perfect. And
she was soon in high demand as a public speaker, on the road for 250 days a year, spreading her principles of effective leadership, forged in extreme environments.
The key to surviving this is that you have to be able to take action based on the situation at the time and not based on some plan. Plans are outdated as soon as they're finished. When you're in environments that change very rapidly, forget about...
The controlling principle here is you can't control what life gives you.
Right.
Only how you respond to it.
Right. You adapt and you keep going.
Is that the message that you find corporate America most in need of hearing?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of messages that they're most in need of hearing. One is that lesson about leadership. It's all about feeling like everybody has skin in the game. So you want to know that your leader has a sense of shared risk, because if you know your leader has just as much skin in the game as you do, that is what builds trust and loyalty among teams.
When she finally decided to write it all down, her book, On the Edge, The Art of High-Impact Leadership, became a bestseller, challenging many established conventions of management.
Failure can be a pretty incredible learning experience. So you have to give yourselves and your people freedom to fail. As long as we're all about getting to the top and winning and being the best. And I think that's really too bad because a lack of failure tolerance really stifles progress and innovation and prevents people from taking risks.
Do we not value failure enough in our culture?
I don't think we do. I think that when you have a big, awesome failure, you learn so much from that. We focus so much on the end point rather than on the journey, and I really think that that's a mistake. You will have people who are not as strong as other members of the team. As leaders, if you can help those people find a way to contribute where they feel valuable, you will often get more out of them than you would have had they been on par with everybody else's skills from the beginning.
The majority of a person's capacity to lead is learned.
Among those who saw her speak was Brigadier General Tom Kolditz, who was running the leadership program at the U.S. Military Academy.
She understands leadership in circumstances where people's lives are on the line.
Attention!
In the rigid, structured world of West Point, General Kolditz wanted the cadets to hear from someone other than the usual assortment of officers lecturing there.
I think fear is actually a good tool. It keeps you awake, alert, on your toes, aware of everything going on around you. Fear's fine. Complacency will absolutely do you in.
Leading in extreme situations, Alison's experience on top of Everest carried enormous credibility.
As a leader, you can never expect the people on your team to be willing to endure anything that you are not willing to endure. So yes, it's painful and difficult and uncomfortable. Too bad, you suck it up, you get out there, you do what you're supposed to do, and you do it for your team.
It's really different when you're talking to someone who can speak to the issue of looking into someone's eyes when you've made a decision that influences their lives.
But usually that's looking into a commander's eyes.
Certainly it's out of the ordinary, but her experience has been compelling.
Compelling doesn't begin to cover it. Not when you consider that this world-class mountaineer who has skied to the North and South Poles was born with a hole in her heart and suffers from a neurological disease that cuts blood flow to her fingers and toes in cold temperatures.
You have a heart defect and you have a condition that makes you more prone to frostbite.
Yes.
Shouldn't you be picking another hobby?
Like golf or something, maybe?
You might think.
But as much success as she had overcoming those obstacles and building a lucrative brand of mountain-based management, Alison often found her mind turning to a larger question during her training.
I started to think about, why do we climb these mountains? For me, there's got to be like something good that can come from this that extends beyond me just learning some great lessons and enjoying myself doing what I love doing.
She found her answer in Uganda, in a small village at the base of the Ruwenzori Mountains. There, she encountered a new kind of challenge, one that was more about changing lives than scaling mountains.
Local women going to the mountains was taboo in their culture, so local women were never permitted in the mountains. And as a result of that, they had no way to earn money because working in these mountains as a porter or a trekking guide or a high-altitude cook is really the only way people there make money.
But you were pushing against cultural norms.
We did get some pushback initially. A lot of the men said, oh, women, local women, they can't climb these mountains. They're just too weak. And local women, they belong in the kitchen, you know, not in the mountains. And it was explaining to the men that allowing women to work in the mountains would benefit the entire community that really changed their views on the matter. And they said, all right, you know, you can try. You want to take them up the mountain? You can try, but they probably won't make it.
And?
They made it. Okay, we'll see you there, huh? Good luck.
Alison started the Climb High Foundation, which took the first of these local women to the top of Mount Stanley, the highest mountain in Uganda. What she gave them was more than a way to earn a living. She showed them a way to make a life.
When you're taking the first woman from this culture that has forbid women to go to the mountains and you take her to the summit, how powerful is that?
It was amazing, and her smile, I mean the smile on this woman's face, and she was like, yeah, I did it. But What was really incredible was what happened when we got down from the mountain. And they're walking back through their village along the dirt road, and people cheered for them and clapped for them and came up and high-fived them.
I'm seeing that this is a very moving thing for you.
It really showed me that climbing a mountain does have some impact, and climbing a mountain can change people's lives.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Which would be a nice ending to the story of Alison Levine and her rich and rewarding life.
For the girl who has courage, Abakali Abamani.
Except this extraordinary woman, who'd achieved what only a few dozen other people ever had, was still haunted by a nagging sense that by not attempting Everest again, she wasn't living the lessons, she was lecturing.
I still felt like I didn't know if I had what it was going to take to get up that mountain. But I knew if I didn't step up to the plate and try, that I would never find out. Every time I would do a speech, I was thinking, okay, well, they were clapping, and maybe I even got a standing ovation, but in my head, I was thinking, this doesn't feel right. It never felt right to me. And
You still had a look in the mirror.
Yeah, and I thought, I have to go back to that mountain, just so I would know that I wasn't letting fear of failure stop me from going back.
Staring down her own fear of failure brought her right back to the top of Everest in 2010, to almost exactly the same point where she'd been forced to turn around 8 years before. That's when another storm rolled in and threatened to end her summit bid all over again.
And I thought, what are the chances I am back on this mountain after 8 years, ready to go for the summit, and in comes a storm again? But the difference was that I knew a lot more about my risk tolerance and about my pain threshold, and I knew what it felt like to get the snot kicked out of me high up on that summit ridge in a storm. So learning from that previous experience that most people would call a failure, learning from that failed experience in 2002 really helped me tremendously push my limits in 2010.
You learn more from your defeats than your victories.
Absolutely.
12 years of experience and wisdom accumulated on the mountains propelled her up the last 100 yards to the top of Mount Everest.
And I can't believe I'm actually at the summit of Mount Everest. And I mean, it was cool to be up there, but I realized this isn't what climbing a mountain is about. It's not about standing at the top. The people that climb those mountains for bragging rights is just to say they did it. It's sort of meaningless. But if you can do it in a way where you're learning and you're helping other people learn and you're building your leadership skills and learning from the people around you, then climbing a mountain's worthwhile. But you have to take something back from it. It can't be just, hey, I touched the top of the mountain, look how cool I am. And
it's what did you bring down from that
it's
mountain
what you
with
bring
you.
down with you, exactly.